Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for Monday the 19th of December 2016. Let's take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies for this week. There it is, updated today the 19th. Still have this cold signal in the tropical Pacific. A few other large areas of colder than normal water throughout the rest of the Pacific Ocean here, at least in the western hemisphere. And that's counterbalanced by this fairly warm look overall to the Atlantic Basin, main development region running above normal, very much above normal in the northwest Atlantic. Caribbean and Gulf also still above normal, something that I like to keep an eye on in the off season to see how this changes over time and in which direction, plus or minus, positive or negative, and what kind of trends we might be seeing. And so far the Atlantic has stayed warmer than normal, and the Pacific has cooled off overall, especially from where it was last year. There's a definite change, and we'll just watch and see over the weeks and months ahead how this factors in as we get into 2017 and eventually into next year's hurricane season. One of the index or indices, if you want to look at it in the plural, that I like to look at would be the Southern Oscillation Index, and it has a 30-day, a 90-day, and then your daily contributor to that overall average. And this really tells us about the pressure pattern of the Pacific. Basically, if it's strongly positive, that's typical of a La Nina setup, and strongly negative, the trade winds typically slow down or reverse, and you get more westerly winds across the tropical Pacific, and for that you typically see a strongly negative SOI. So what do we have right now? Well, generally everything is fairly close to zero, especially in the longer term, the 90 and 30-day. Close to zero, not strongly positive, and certainly not negative just yet. So we will watch this too, because this sort of helps to, it's kind of a precursor to what may happen. Usually the SOI will crash, deeply negative as an example, and stay there, trending negative, and then your El Nino starts to take shape slowly later on. So it's kind of a cause and effect thing. Still not very well understood overall, because the El Nino phenomenon, even though it certainly has probably happened over the eons, we only have maybe 30 years of reliable satellite and ocean data to accurately map and try to understand it. But this is one of the things I like to watch, and it's still fairly close to neutral for the time being. Subsurface temperature anomalies, the cold pool of water here extending down about 150 to 200 meters or so, shrinking away, getting eroded a little bit, and not as strong overall. At the same time, we're seeing a larger area of these positive anomalies start to take shape here in the western Pacific, extending all the way down, I say all the way, going down 450 meters. Believe me, the ocean is much deeper than that. But for this data, this is as far down as it goes. One little island of cool showing up, and this is something to watch. Again, we're talking about the last update here, the 14th of December. We'll have to see how this evolves over time. Maybe next week I'll show the animation of this, and you can see how things change. It looks like a big conveyor belt a lot of times, where it kind of goes like this for the most part. Normally, your trade winds at the surface up here blow from east to west, and you generally upwell water back over on the east side here, and if that water is warm, like we're seeing over here, it can surface and you start to spread it out, and you get the beginnings of an El Nino. So that'll be something to watch in the next few months as we head into 2017. Some forecasts are indicating the possibility of El Nino conditions next year. Pretty hard to do. You usually don't see an El Nino a year after the last El Nino, or even 2 years. It can happen, but it's usually 3 to 5 years or longer between El Ninos. So that'll be curious to watch, won't it? The actual temperatures, these different lines of equal temperature here, these are called isotherms. Lines of equal pressure are called isobars. So this is a contour map showing the different temperature gradations in the western Atlantic, and this is in degrees Celsius. So here's 26 degrees Celsius, which is roughly 79.5 or so. And this represents the Gulf Stream for the most part up through here. Still fairly warm. If you got in a boat off of Hatteras Inlet and went out into the Gulf Stream and jumped in, water temperatures will be in the mid to upper 70s, so not bad. If the air temperatures are in the 40s, it might feel like jumping into a warm bath with that much of a temperature contrast. That's probably stretching it a bit, but you get the idea. And these temperatures will continue to cool down, but they are running above normal across this area, very much so. So again, if we can get the jet stream energy involved and Arctic air with some kind of energy coming out of the southern states or the Gulf, maybe we'll have a nor'easter of substantial caliber up here along the East Coast at some point. It seems lately, in the last few years, 14, 15, and 16 here, that they come in January and February. November, December has been quiet for the most part. You remember 2015, especially up here in New England, your winter really didn't start until the latter part of January, and it ended in March. But boy, that time in between there was just jam-packed with storm after storm and brutal cold. Last year, it was pretty much just one major winter storm. So we'll see what happens for this year, especially in the absence of a strong El Nino or an El Nino at all. Cooler in the Pacific, as I talked about previously. In the Gulf of Mexico, the 26-degree line Celsius, remember, right through here. I like to watch and see how long it takes. Just one of my ways to pass the time when it's not hurricane season, for this to retreat south and get eroded away, and eventually does it just kind of get confined to the Yucatan Channel in the Northwest Caribbean, or does this warm water kind of lurk down here in the Bay of Campeche all winter long? If we go back to the anomaly map just for a moment, most of the Gulf of Mexico here running above the long-term average by a degree or two Celsius. And remember, if you didn't catch this before, I think I mentioned it at one point, that the Gulf of Mexico's average temperature for the past hurricane season was 84.1 degrees. And that was the highest I think it had ever been. And yet there were no hurricanes to speak of, just Hermine right up here in the northeast corner of the Gulf. Really didn't bother the rest of the Gulf at all. So this water is undisturbed, quite warm, and we'll see how long it takes for this to cool off. You can bet that a few Arctic fronts will make it in with cold air advecting over the surface there and mixing things up and cooling them off. All right, so the other thing I like to look at in the off-season videos here, any kind of big-ticket, high-impact weather event, whether it be severe weather, especially in the spring. You can get severe weather in the winter, though, make no mistake. Or big winter storms, especially East Coast storms. I don't want to ignore our friends out west, but it's quite a bit harder and a lot more costly for me to get out west. In fact, I've only done it a couple of times, and that was for the remnants of tropical cyclones coming up into the southwest U.S. in the summer. But yeah, my main interest, mainly because I'm here, and it's much easier to drive here than it is out here. I think you get the idea. So I'm really on the lookout for these storms that either get their origin over here and come up the coast, or maybe they come off this way or up like that. A lot of different possibilities. For now, the map is generally blank. This is our hazards map, watches and warnings, things of that nature, in the eastern two-thirds of the U.S. Up here, though, in the northwest United States, winter storm watches, warnings, all kinds of different scenarios going on. If we move down and see the legend, winter storm, high wind warning, avalanche warning, yikes, flood warning, gale warning, hydrologic outlook, probably some of that has to do. And we can click in here and take a look at Washington and Oregon as an example, if it'll ever load for me. There we go. So yeah, out there, hydrologic outlook. So just as an example, the information you can get from these, this is what I like to point out. So they're talking about the hydrology, or the water, okay? And so rain and snowmelt may impact travel tonight and Tuesday. So again, these high impact weather events, not a big giant population center compared to the East Coast out here in Washington and Oregon, but you do have Seattle and Portland, and people travel out here, Montana, Idaho. This is where the active weather is. Why aren't we having much here in the east right now? Well, the front came through, delivered much colder temperatures down here, but there's really no other mechanism to drive a storm system across. This is what the steering pattern looks like, 500 millibars, jet stream level roughly, and basically this isn't the stormy pattern that, remember Star Wars, these are not the droids you're looking for. Well, this is not the pattern that you're looking for if you're looking for storminess or winter storms along the East Coast. I had to throw a Star Wars thing in there. I saw Rogue One the other night. Great movie, and that's all I'll say about that, because this is not a movie review video. But anyway, this is not the pattern we're looking for storminess. Why? Well, overall, the jet stream isn't configured as such. I mean, what I look for, and I'm not a winter storm expert, but I generally know what to look for. Okay, so when I've seen storminess, I typically see the jet stream dipping down longitudinally like that, real sharp, just a deep digging trough in the jet stream, and then some kind of southern stream energy coming along and intersecting with it, maybe an upper level low, or a system comes out of the Pacific Northwest and gets involved with this, kind of phases with it, and then you get a big monster storm that goes up the East Coast. Well, you can see this pattern as well as I can. This is a very broad trough. It's not very sharp, and a lot of the flow coming off the Pacific here. Really, the coldest air is way up here in Canada with that northwest flow coming down this way, still through Canada. Some of it in the northern tier states for sure, but this just isn't the pattern. And if we go through the next several days, it really doesn't change much. But also, keep your eye on what's happening in the western Atlantic here as we move through the time period, 3, 4, 5 days out. The pattern really doesn't change that much for favoring deep Arctic air in the lower 48, nor, and with that, storminess. It's just not there. And then, as we get out here at about a week out, close to Christmas and beyond, very large area of high pressure begins to build across Florida and the southwest Atlantic again, and you're not dipping that jet stream down. It's just being shunted away. All right, so if we keep moving out, there's a week. I mean, good grief. Look at that. We're out, what is this? Not even a week yet, just close to it. Very large area of high pressure. Where? Over that very warm water of the southwest Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, probably aiding in that process just a little bit. So there's no way, when you have this monster ridge parked right over Florida here, that you're going to dig in a jet stream on top of that to even allow energy to come out and phase and become a big storm system. So over the next week to 10 days, not a very stormy pattern, not very cold relative to average anyway, and certainly no records to speak of. So Christmas travel shouldn't be too bad. And then as we head into the new year, I don't think that's going to be too bad either. But the rubber band has to snap at some point, right? And it'll be only a matter of time, even if it's just a few weeks. Kind of like hurricane season, where conditions become favorable, and we will have some winter storms to watch for along the East Coast especially. All right, so that's it for me for now. Have a great rest of your week ahead. As always, I do appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't subscribed on our YouTube channel, go ahead and do so now, and you can get alerts when I post any future updates. I am putting the finishing touches on the 2016 program, the look back at the 2016 hurricane season. It's called Tracking the Hurricanes. It's actually our 4th episode. I did one in 04, 05, and 08, so this will be the 4th installment. And it's almost done. I'm going to try to get it done near Christmas Eve or so, maybe a little before, and I'll post that out there for you guys to take a look at. It actually goes all the way back to 2009 and a pretty big retrospective of where we've come from, sort of old technology and how we've changed with our missions over time, all the way up through the fairly tumultuous 2016 season and all the changes in between. I think it's a very exciting look at what we've done since the last time I produced a video, a full-length video in 2008. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, if you subscribe to the channel here, you will be alerted when I post that. All right? So again, have a great rest of your week ahead. If you're traveling later on, be safe out there. Want you back to enjoy future videos. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Again, thanks for your time and attention today. I'll be back with you sometime next week.